So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and as was said last time, we're going to be making a return to Moria today, because it's been a little while since we've seen Moria, and I did get given, I think, 3 or 4 replays actually on Moria, so I had to just choose one, and I chose it, to be fair, kind of at random, but also because I believe this one is sort of the most quote-unquote lore-friendly with the distribution of good and evil factions in their proper places, as it were. So that did contribute somewhat to my choice to use this particular replay over a couple of the others. And we're going to be seeing Khazad-Dum, Dorwinion and Gondor on the defence. So clearly the war has gone rather poorly in the north and the south of the Free Peoples of Middle-earth, and they're going to have to try and retreat to the Misty Mountains as both the forces of Dorwinion and Gondor do so. And on the outside we have 4 evil factions, well, kind of. Numenor is also here as well, but it's as close as can be gotten to the actual thing here. Kind of an interesting thing as well, because this is like a version of Moria, I think, that's slightly different in the fact that the outside looks different. Like, you don't have the fields that extend off into the distance. You have a cliff over here, and also you have a rather remarkable drop off into some vast yawning chasm over here. But that's not going to be too important. The interior of the settlement still remains entirely the same after all, and that's where the entirety of the battle will be taking place. So we'll go through the attackers first of all, and considering we're over here, we shall go through this army first and foremost, and it's going to be Isengard, played by Lord Blackhole. So he's got some a fire of Orthanc here, so obviously a black powder cart. Again, I'm not sure how useful this is going to be per se. I don't know if you can actually use it to knock down gates. I know you can use it to knock down walls. If you can use it to knock down gates, then you can probably knock a few defenders that are behind it over, but I highly doubt they'll be close enough once they see the black powder cart advancing for it to actually get any kills, but we'll see. Maybe. It's certainly something a little bit different. We've got some Dunlending clansmen here on the front as well. Once again, their heightened anti-cavalry bonus is probably not going to be too important on a match like this, but they will still fill the role of fodder, which will be quite necessary for all the attackers as this fight goes on. Uruk-hai archers as well, of course. They won't stand too much of a chance in a skirmish fight with really any of the defenders. Even the slightly lightly armoured orc hunters of Khazad-Dum are going to be they're going to be able to deal too much damage for the Uruk-hai archers to keep pace with. The Uruk-hai crossbowmen are, of course, a completely different matter altogether. If they can get into a good position, will be able to use those bolts to devastating effect against all the defenders, really, because none of them lack for armour, and heavily armoured units are the favourite target of crossbows, of course, although they can reasonably kill anything, really. Some Dunlending veterans back here as well. In comparison to the Uruk-hai raiders, they have slightly fewer men in the unit, but they also have slightly higher attack as well on account of those axes. Whether that will actually be useful in this case remains to be seen. Just in behind we have more attack-focused units with the AP from the Half-Orc Baneguard and the Uruk-hai Reapers. The Baneguard have significantly fewer men in the unit, but they do have better stats individually, particularly with regards to their defense, I have to say. Like, their armor is better, they've got those shields as well, some of their unit models. So yeah, like a little bit tankier individually, but honestly I would probably prefer the greater numbers that the Uruk-hai Reavers offer. Both of them, of course, are AP. We also have some Trolls of the White Hand over here ready to advance. Obviously could be very, very useful at smashing through a defence which is underprepared, but you have to be pretty careful with Trolls. Even some of the strongest Trolls, like the White Hand Trolls, can be overwhelmed, especially when you're dealing with high attack units like heavy swordsmen or heavy axemen, so you need to be really careful. But if used at the right time, they can still be something which tips the balance of the battle in favour of the user of said Trolls. Lots of Uruk-hai infantry as well, not too surprising. You're going to need a bit of quality here to really back up your fodder in this situation. Obviously going into Moria, it's going to be a very tough affair to grind your way through the narrow hallways, but the Uruk-hai infantry will be better suited for that than a lot of other Orc line infantry because of their well-drilled stats. We also have some Uruk-hai pikemen in behind if they can be used later on. We've seen time and time again that pikemen, if they are saved till later when there's really not a lot of ranged ammunition for either side left, their extra range can really be quite instrumental in a victory, and the Uruk-hai pikemen especially, because their stats are pretty decent. So it's going to be, for a pike unit, their stats are pretty decent anyway. So they can really help swing a battle in favour of Isengard. Got some Guards of Orthanc back here, of course, the heavy spears, multiple HP, very, very tough to kill. Not necessarily the best at dealing damage, but that isn't their primary function anyway. What are good at dealing damage are the Uruk-hai Berserkers, of course. As soon as their hit points are expended, they have a real problem with melee defense and armor, because they have very low scores in both. In fact, in armor, I think their score is actually 0. But having said that, while their hit points are still active, they will be able to do a tremendous amount of damage, especially against armoured units, which a lot of the defenders will be heavily armoured today, so they are definitely a good choice. I probably would have punted for the Nazkai instead of the Guards of Orthanc for those reasons as well. Then we have Pharaoh playing as Rhun, so he's got some Variag mercenaries, so chasing down Dorwinion after their inevitable victories over in the east. Variag Mercenary is a good choice because, like I keep saying, the Narim, who people tend to go for, and there are some Narim in here as well, are not as good as absorbing punishment as the Variag Mercenaries. And in this sort of situation, when you're on the attack and you need to wear the enemy down, something like the Variag Mercenaries are going to be far stronger to doing that. We have some Gamphrin back here as well, so some Halberdiers, the AP, also can be very useful against the Dwarves of Khazad-Dum, Gondor, and the Elvelyn units from Dorwinion, provided, of course, they aren't shot up in the same way that the Uruk-hai pikemen will be subject to, I'm sure. The Dragon's Breath are very, very powerful, overpowered to be quite frank in the current build of the game, but whether it can actually be used in the settlements of Moria to good effect remains to be seen. Because of the narrow choke points, it could probably be quite difficult to set it up into a place. If they can, then it will be devastating, because obviously then the narrow settlement will work against the defenders. But if I think it'll be quite difficult to get it into a good position without it taking damage. Carmel's Shadow Guard, Flaggrim, so again more AP, line infantry and shock infantry. Further back we have the Shadow Bows, so some rangers, which can be devastating if they get in the right position, of course. Scion Rim, the heavy spears, a very reliable centre to the line. Flaggrim, Eastron crossbows, unlike the Isengard crossbows, they're much easier to kill from range, but the same principles apply, a lot of stopping power there. And the Carmel's Chosen. So the Carmel's Chosen, of course, the General's Bodyguard tier unit, which will sit quite happily in the middle of the Runic army and be that sort of the core of their efforts. And some Eastron crossbows as well. Heading over to the other side, of course, Numenor taking point here, so certainly a lot of quality on display from Numenor, I would imagine. Bawabarim, AP arrows going to be very useful, of course, for dealing with the heavily armoured defenders. We have some Belagai pikemen to back up the inevitable front line. Nardukadar, again, AP spears. AP going to be useful against all the defending factions, as I said. The Remena Abarim as well, so Numenor's army is inevitably going to be smaller than the other attacking armies, but the quality could be an interesting factor here, as long as they don't get bottled up and shot to death by all of the defending skirmishers and potentially artillery. Numenor could be a real difference maker in a fight like this. The Remena Abarim in particular, there's not really, Khazad-Dum have the ability to defeat them in sort of a line infantry fight, but against Gondor and Dorwinion, the Remena Abarim are going to be too much for equivalent units to deal with. Royal Legion of Armenelos are obviously another really strong unit in their own right as well as, of course, the Pharazim Swordmasters, Numenor's Pride and Joy, and then several units of Seafarers of Nin Damos as well, which, of course, throw their payloads in and then make pretty decent makeshift line infantry, which is important. Having everyone's, the ability to have everyone sort of chip in melee is important for the attacks in a siege like this, because it means they're much more easily able to keep up the pressure. And finally we have Angmar, played by Grizzly Fox, so Guardians of Khazad-Dum, the faction that everybody loves to hate Angmar, but very useful in a siege like this, especially backing up the quality of Numenor. That's a very potent combination indeed. Guardians of Khazad-Dum pushing up several rams, Witch Ram, Blackguard, Scourge Raiders and Witchers back here, so obviously the Blackguard, really, really strong infantry unit in their own right. Witchers, everyone's favourite unit, of course, we'll see how well they can do here. Angmar Marauders and Snaga Stalkers, so some slightly lower quality units, as well as Angmar Halberdiers, going for a little bit more in terms of numbers, which I agree with, if they're going to act as a foil to Numenor. Gundabad Guard, a couple of units of Blackwatch Legion, and then way over here, a couple of units of upgraded Witch Realm Pikemen. Be interesting to see, although I do think, considering it's a 4v3 and considering how defensible Moria is, I think units like the Witches and the Dragon's Breath, the threat of them is actually quite important for the attackers here, because in a 4v3 on Moria, especially considering the factions that are on the defense, will actually give the advantage to the defenders. But that may not be the case with units like the Witches, the Dragon's Breath, and other such things in play. MSQ2 is going to be playing as Gondor, so he's got some Gondorian archers, Fountain Guard, militia on the front as well, so going for some cheaper units backed up by the Fountain Guard and Guards of Osgiliath, which is decent. It means that you've still got the quality there, but you've also got a lot of numbers here that the enemy will have to try and hack and slash their way through. And the Gondor militia infantry, of course, as sword militia, won't be quite so easy to defeat in a melee fight as spear militia would be. Or at the very least, they'll do a little bit more damage. Cavalry is an interesting choice. The Mithrandir's retinue, again, MSQ2 has a little bit of a penchant for being aggressive and getting away with it, sort of overly aggressive and getting away with it. I'd be very surprised if the Mithrandir's retinue charged outside the gates and achieved much of anything, to be honest with you. I think Angmar and Numenor should have all that is required to deal with that. Gondor archers just in behind will provide some fire support. Ravenhelms, the heavy swordsmen. I mean, as far as human swordmasters go, a lot of them are kind of underwhelming. The Ravenhelms are pretty decent though, because they do have a really high armor value in addition to their really high melee defense. So provided they're not taking arrow fire, they can actually do a decent job Maybe they're still a little bit expensive for what they offer though. Vanguard of King Elisar, so the bodyguard equivalent basically of that. A trebuchet as well, which trebuchet is in an ideal position. It doesn't have a lot of ammunition, but if it has well placed shots, that could be a real difference maker here as well. Ithilien Rangers and Wardens of Minas Ithil as well are going to be really important, because body piercing, of course, when you're on the defenders, can really help to tilt the balance of power. Khazad-Dum, played by Ricky Beagle, he's got some upgraded 4th Legion Shield Guard. Obviously Khazad-Dum, one of the infantry powerhouses in the game. Orc Hunters of Khazad-Dum, decent archers as well. Elven quality archers really, as well, on the same level as sort of the more basic Elven archers, which is what the Orc Hunters of Khazad-Dum are, more basic archers, but it is also their only offering as well. Dorwinion, played by Tundra's Fox, he's got some Nandor Glade Guard and some Helvellyn infantry here in the town centre. Heading up here to the high ground, we can see that there is some Morroquendi Glade Masters, so probably in terms of just sheer quality, it'll be between these guys and the Pharazim Sword Masters for what will be the sort of the strongest two-handed weapon infantry unit on the field today, because Khazad-Dum, of course, have got some really strong infantry units of their own, but mostly their real expertise lies in shielded units. Mercenary Crossmen over here, interesting. They can, they're obviously more mobile, but they still have those crossbows, which will be very useful on the defence, because Khazad-Dum have no foot crossbows after all. Helvellyn Marksmen, we have some Helvellyn infantry, some more Nandor Glade Guard. Obviously the Morroquendi units for Dorwinion will be nice, because they aren't so reliant on their armour, and they do give a bit of a different dimension to what the rest of Dorwinion and of course their two allies, Khazad-Dum and Gondor, offer. Upgraded 2nd Legion, Sons of the Fallen, really, really powerful front line. More Helvellyn Marksmen, and then the final vestiges of the defending armies are down here, which I would imagine is mostly Khazad-Dum. 4th Legion, Sentries, 2nd Legion, there's also some Hammers of Gundabad who have deployed some stakes at the front. Morroquendi Pikes backing up some Vine Guard, Marksmen, Orc Hunters, there's also some Morroquendi Bows with their Poison Shot, Mithril Guard, Reclaimers, also the Helvellyn Hammer Guard and more Sons of the Fallen, as well as some more Nandor Glade Guard and Helvellyn Infantry. But I think I will make a bit of a cut here, because I would imagine that it's going to take a little while to trundle up to the gates, and even then the attackers may choose to delay their assault a little bit. But as soon as it looks like the action is about to begin, I will cut back in. So a cut it will be, and I will rejoin when the battle is joined. Well, that is the fire of Orthanc. So it does clearly work on the gate. Obviously, all of the berserkers are now crispy. They also didn't lock over the Dunlending clansmen, but they're just over there, and also I think as well, yeah, all of the dwarves were safely far away from the gates. So that's more for theatrical effect really than anything else, using the black powder cart for this battle, but still interesting and an intimidating way to enter the settlement, if nothing else. And also they are now battering down the gates on the other side, so we may as well join the battle here. And over here, to be fair, Angmar were right next to Numenor, so they'll be able to start up right away. Rhun and Nar-Dukadar manning the rams and breaking down the gates to Moria. As the chanting commences from the Witchram Scourge Raiders, is that? Yes, it is. Interesting unit, to be sure. In terms of their damage, you'd imagine they'd be quite good in a battle like this, but unfortunately for them, they're also not brilliant when it comes to, well, there goes the gates, but not brilliant when it comes to taking arrow fire, and unfortunately for them, Gondor and Dorwinion especially are going to be able to pour on a lot of ranged pressure here. Numenor, though, are an interesting faction to have on the attack. If they can be bottled up, they should be fine, but if they can't, then their quality will maybe help spur themselves and Angmar on through the settlement. Isengard and Rhun on the other side, though, interesting as well. They're both sort of more well-balanced factions, so it'll be interesting to see how they handle the defence, especially seeing as though it looks like they're going to be primarily dealing with Khazad-Dum, whereas on the other side it's going to be Gondor mainly, as the Dunlending clansmen filter in, as well as the Uruk-hai archers. They're probably going to open up with a bit of a skirmish, but that's not something Isengard are going to make too much ground up in. But between themselves and Rhun, to be fair, they could make a big dent in the ammo supply of the defenders, if nothing else. But units like the Helvellyn Marksmen are ideally suited for skirmishing, and unfortunately the Uruk-hai archers, the same amount of quality just isn't really there. Over on the other side, meanwhile, Goblin Band now there, the Nar-Dukadar pulling off the Goblin Band. They will be the first ones in. MSQ2 certainly has a rather intimidating defence lined up for them as they move through, but he's not going to defend the gate initially. Obviously he wants them to come further in, draw them into range of that trebuchet, which I can certainly understand. Going a little bit more numbers heavy as well means he won't be subject to being overrun quite so much, but units like the Gondor Militia Infantry are going to really struggle against the offerings from Numenor especially, but even most of the Angmar units, to be fair. Like the Guardians of Khazad-Dum will have an easy enough time of it. This is a rather strange decision from Grizzly Fox to send forward one of his more vulnerable units to missile fire first and foremost, because obviously that's going to be an ideal target for the Gondor archers to shoot into them. So obviously this is a sign that Grizzly Fox doesn't really understand what this unit's all about. And obviously they're also going to get chased down by the Mithrandir's retinue. They're going to scurry away pretty quickly though, to be fair to them. The cavalry just about catches up to them, but they're going to need to leave pretty quickly. The Goblin Band are not a particularly good unit of spears, but they are still spears nonetheless. And these Gondorian riders won't want to stick around in melee with any kind of spear unit for too long. The Rhun Scourge Raider is going to come forward. They're going to trap some of those unit models in as well, so yeah, there you go. All four of them dying almost simultaneously there, interestingly enough. But still not a huge amount of progress being made, and the Gondorian archers will continue to fire. Just a single level of armour upgrades on these guys, but considering the kind of foes they're probably going to be facing, another armour upgrade level wouldn't allow them to defeat stuff like Rhun anyway. And they're obviously still going to rather comfortably defeat units that Angmar can offer. But yeah, this is a very puzzling decision, to be honest with you, from Grizzly Fox, and he's going to be punished for that, as he should be. These Gondor archers are easily going to be able to rip the Rhun Scourge Raiders limb from limb. Thought I heard the trebuchet firing then. There is actually a sort of stink cloud up here, which indicates that the trebuchet has been using its rotten meat shot, but I don't know, I wouldn't use the trebuchet at all at the moment. You're playing with fire there, it's one of your best weapons, don't waste it on single units like that. Uruk-hai archers firing away, being covered by Dunlending clansmen so they can't be closed down by infantry, at least not initially. You can see here the Elvelyn marksmen are going to be returning fire, a few of them already dead, but the Elvelyn marksmen, of course. The Elvelyn in general have got very, very good armour scores. And just in general they will be able to outlast a single unit of Uruk-hai archers. Things might be a bit different when Rhun arrive on the scene with their own archers, and indeed that is what's happening right now. The Variag mercenaries filtering into the settlement now, and with their shields and slightly stronger armour than the Uruk-hai archers in front of them. Also, just in terms of sheer numbers here, the attackers will start to put some more ranged pressure on this defence over here. Meanwhile, over here, more units coming in, but this one unit of Gondor archers has been able to really feast on these Rhun Scourge Raiders so far. A real gift for the defenders, I have to say. As they move in, Numenor starting to sort of take cover behind some of these cliff walls, ready to reinforce should they need to. Rhun getting into position. Those axes finally being thrown, but they're being thrown into the archers themselves. Like, again, it's a very... because I've seen Grizzly Fox play before, but this is the sort of thing that a player who's never played the game before would do. Very, very puzzling indeed. Goblin Band now moving forward, but again, unlike on the other side where the Dunlending clansmen were in front of the ranged unit they were covering, here they're not going to be able to move in to save the remnants of the Rhun Scourge Raiders quickly enough. The armour-piercing arrows from the Boabrim now being used by Fils. But what is he actually firing out? I think he's trying to go for the Fountain Guard, but unfortunately for him, there are so many militia infantrymen in front that most of the kills he's going to get are probably going to be on the militiamen, which Gondor will absolutely take to absorb some of that very limited armour-piercing arrows supply that the Rhun Boabrim are given. Guards of Khazad-Dum are coming over here, so definitely doesn't get any easier. Bit of friendly fire there as well on the routing Scourge Raiders. But so far, not a particularly good use of resources over here from Numenor or Angmar, I have to say. Over on the other side, meanwhile, a little bit more textbook here from Rhun and Isengard, doing what they can to put a little bit of pressure on the defence. At the very least, this will have the effect of using up the arrow supply a little bit more of the defenders, which for the defenders, that sort of thing is going to be more important. They're going to want to use some of their ammunition at the very least on the large blobs of infantry that the attackers will inevitably send down the narrow halls at Moria. To be fair, if they only use a couple of units of Elvelyn marksmen to absorb most of the arrow fire of the attackers, they're in a pretty decent place themselves. They save stuff like the Morroquendi's bows and the Orcans of Khazad-Dum for later. That's a little bit more in the way of damage. The Elvalin Marksman, another unit of Elvalin Marksmen heading towards the front. And they should be just fine with that. Trebuchet still waiting menacingly. It is a pretty intimidating looking defence when you consider that most of the initial lines will be made up of militia. Perhaps it shouldn't be quite so scary for the attackers, but if the attackers move in numbers, the trebuchet is going to hit them, so I can understand any caution. Gondor now moving forwards, perhaps sensing the fact that things are looking a little bit bleaker for the attacks over here. They're going to send in a unit of Ravenhelms, which is definitely bold. I mean, it's only Boabrim. Well, no, there's Nardukadar over here. Between the Boabrim, Goblin Band, and the Remena Nardukadar, I think they should be able to defeat a single unit of Ravenhelms. The Goblin Band themselves are obviously just trash, but the Remena units over here are most certainly not. But the Boabrim are going to leave. Interesting to see how this fight goes, actually. The Goblin Band are immediately, of course, taking some pretty heavy losses at the hands of the Gondorian Zweihanders. The Nardukadar, however, will be able to stand firm, and with their AP as well, they'll be ideally suited for taking on a unit like the Ravenhelms. And the Ravenhelms as well allowed themselves to get surrounded there. They went into pretty much the worst possible engagement they could have taken there. If they'd have just charged into the front of the Goblin Band, they would have done a lot of damage, and then they would have been able to fight the Nardukadar from one direction. As it is, they got themselves surrounded and got ripped apart. So again, not brilliant judgment there, I have to say. Gondor Militia Infantry coming in now as well. The Trebuchet taking the first shots. Maybe not the most devastating shots they could have when the blobs of infantry come in later. But they did still score some decent hits on the Remena Abarim. The Witchers are here actually as well. I mean, now is the time to use archers. I'm just wondering, however, if they actually see where the Witchers are. They most certainly will now. Getting a large amount of damage done to that unit of Gondor Militia Infantry again. It's mainly the Militia Infantry that has taken the bulk of the damage so far, which Gondor will be happy with, but these numbers will add up in the end. The Witchers need to get out of here before they get shredded, which they will just about manage, although 9 is not a full complement, so they must have lost 1 or 2 somewhere along the way. Just one shot, but enough to do some substantial damage. This Militia Infantry on the front line is also going to slowly but surely get torn to pieces by the Remena Abarim, the Nardukadar, and any supporting goblins that want to chip in. And the Ravenhelms, of course, the units that got surrounded in between those two were very quickly dealt with. So not great for them. And the goblins are now going to try and push forwards, do some more damage to this front line. But yeah, I mean, obviously MSQ2, to be fair, in this case, I think that attacking forwards and trying to force the attackers, I should say, into doing something, maybe committing forward some more men to bring them into range of the trebuchet wasn't the worst thing to do. It could have been executed better, but it wasn't necessarily the wrong thing to do. Meanwhile, over here on this side, still the skirmish fight continues. 2 archers for whom this is really their day job, the Variag mercenaries and the Elvalin marksmen. The Elvalin should still have the advantage here. They're, in terms of quality, the stronger archer. Their armour is also significantly stronger. The shield does make a difference for the Variag mercenaries, and maybe the damage they had already taken from the Uruk-hai archers will make a bit of a difference. But over here you can see a bit of pressure being put on now. I mean, these archers can't support the Dunlending clansmen, which means it's going to be a straight up fight between Dunlending clansmen and Hammers of Gundabad, which of course that fight is quite incredibly one-sided. These Dunlenders won't last too long in melee against these dwarven shock infantrymen. A little bit further back, veterans could be committed forward, but definitely slow and steady wins the race for Isengard and Rhun over here. They're definitely playing the long game, whereas over on the other side a bit more has already happened because of the higher aggression from both the attackers and the defenders over here, to be honest. But to be fair, the initial Gondorian counter-attack is almost completely gone at this point. The trebuchet, I think, fired again, albeit not to huge effect by the looks of things. Witchram Scourge Raiders, only 18 of them left. The Witchers are coming back, but they have been spotted. That's the key. As soon as you see the Witchers, they are going to try and fire once again. What are they going to fire at, though? If they were going to fire at the Fountain Guard, they just retreated back behind the pillar. They could fire at the militia once again, but again, that's not really worth it considering the value of the Witcher's ammunition and the limited nature of it, it's capable of doing tremendous damage, of course, but they don't have that many shots, especially not when their unit is still full. Angmar Marauders charging in through the gap, perhaps? I mean, these Ravenhelms are still holding on. They're still holding up all of these units from moving further into the settlement. So credit to them for that, but obviously they haven't looked like winning this fight for quite some time at this point. More arrows being loosed. Wabarim still firing their missiles. Abarim still around the corner. Mithrandir's retinue are also going to charge forward. Angmar Marauders, victory seems certain. They're going to try and stop the Gondor archers from firing, but in so doing they're going to put themselves at the mercy of the advancing Mithrandir's retinue, and with the damage they've already taken and the stretched out nature of their unit, even the Gondor archers will probably be able to look after themselves in melee decently well. Obviously with those armour stats they're going to be fairly difficult for a basic unit of Orc infantry to wear down, but they will at least stop firing point blank into the attacking forces. Yeah, there they go, look, the Angmar Marauders broken and running for the hills. Goblin Band are also routing as well, so the initial offerings from Angmar have been sent packing, although Numenor are still here. Meanwhile, over here, some half-orc Baneguard have been sent forward, which is a little bit more like it, but you can see here the Dunlending clansmen have been easily dealt with by the Hammers of Gundabad, and unfortunately here as well, it's very easy to hit the half-orc Baneguard for those Elvalin marksmen, so definitely more worthwhile, I think, going after the Baneguard here for the defenders, cut down on some of that attacking AP, which they're obviously going to find very useful as the fight goes along. Victory seems certain for the Hammers of Gundabad. To be fair, even the Baneguard, like, they're only a basic unit of shock infantry, really. The Hammers of Gundabad are significantly stronger, so obviously it's going to be still a fight that goes very much in favour of the dwarves, fighting on home turf as well. Khazad-Dum. Sounds like the thundering approach of more units, indeed it is. More from Isengard as well, a unit of Dunlending veterans heading towards the front. Again, the quality isn't really there for the Dunlending veterans. Their attack is decent for the kind of unit that they are, but again, like when you're going up against a unit like Hammers of Gundabad as well are locked morale, so it's not even as if you can wear them down to the point where they'll rout. They will fight to the bitter end and take their toll every step of the way there. Let's see here. Variag mercenaries continuing the fire, but you can see here the Elvalin marksmen reasonably comfortable in this sort of fight. I mean, they have taken a lot of damage here. There are a lot of dead ones over here, but as each volley comes in, very few of them fall because of their really thick Elvalin plate armour. A unit of Elvalin infantry going to move forward to try and help out the Hammers of Gundabad over here because, you know, they are under a decent amount of pressure at this point. A lot of numbers. They should still win this fight, to be fair, even without support, but with support this will be a very easy endeavour indeed, the Elvalin infantry. Not the best at dealing damage, it must be said, but they are very, very solid, very difficult to wear down. And that's exactly the sort of unit that the Hammers of Gundabad will appreciate fighting alongside, because they can handle the damage dealing. And as long as they've got a supporting unit that doesn't die easily, they should be just fine. More units move forward. E-Strong crossbows are an interesting choice to move forward, because they will make a very good target as well for the Elvalin marksmen. And already that is proving to be the case, but we'll see what they fire at. We shall see. Meanwhile, continuing the fire, another unit of Angmar Marauders was committed forward to try and stop the Gondor archers from fire. It might have been the same one actually returning from routing, but of course they were immediately sandwiched by some militia, and the Gondor archers themselves also stood their ground, although they've taken a fair amount of damage at this point. What have we got going on over here? Men and Nardukad are still fighting. One Ravenhelm. The duel between this swordsman and spearman. On paper you'd probably say the Ravenhelm should win this fight, but the AP can make a big difference. The faster attack of spearmen in general as well means he's going to get more opportunities to actually get the kill. Every big swing the Ravenhelm makes, though, it seems to have an effect. Oh no, the Nardukad are going to run away, and he turned his back on the duel and was immediately bisected. Still the arrows continue to fly. Seafarers of Nindamos are over here. Again, not the sort of unit you can afford to waste. Their dual purpose nature as javelin man and line infantry is going to be so important for the attackers over here, especially, you know, that initial javelin volley. They're going to need that damage on units like Fountain Guard. in order to give themselves the initiative, but that's not going to happen here, especially not if they use their javelins on Gondor archers. Don't do it, Phils, don't do it. I mean, I think it's better that he used it on a larger unit of militia infantry than on the heavily depleted Gondor archers there, but it's still not ideal, to be honest with you. I mean, the militia infantry are here purely for their purpose of absorbing damage, but here, a big committal here, or at least a bigger committal. Rhun and BALIN are going to be following in the Angmar halberdiers. The Snaga stalkers are moving forward, but that's all the excuse the Athelian rangers need. Start doing their thing. This always makes me nervous when a big blob moves forward and the rangers start piling into them. It's like an unfortunate paradox. Whenever the rangers are sort of ideally suited to shoot into a blob, it's where the game just cannot handle it, and if I zoom in on it, it'll crash. So unfortunate, but over here, I mean, it's good to see the attackers are actually moving in at this point, having a look from on high, but they are still being boxed up. This is where MSQ2 can send in and sort of commit all of his units, including the Guards Fosgiliath and the Fountain Guard. So the Phalanx being supported by that militia infantry. Defeat seems certain for them, though. Guardians of Khazad-Dum and the militia. This is the downside to using such a cheap unit. They are running for the town centre. Athelian Rangers also leaving. They've already taken a bit of damage, to be fair, the militia infantry. They've already proven themselves, you know, to be worth why they were brought for MSQ2, but their abilities in melee against some of the stronger Angmar and Numenor units, which they will now have to face up against, are very much lacking. So Gondor are going to be very much dependent on their Phalanx units, their Guards Fosgiliath, but especially their Fountain Guard with that AP to try and do most of the heavy lifting for them. Meanwhile, over here, Rhun also committing some more units forward, so a little bit more serious now. AP line infantry should be useful against the dwarves and the Elvalin infantry, ideal for the Elvalin infantry actually, but the quality of the hammers of Gundabad is still going to be a problem because of the high damage they do. The Flagrim will still struggle there, but it's good to see that Rhun are sort of ratcheting up the stakes a little bit, sending in some higher quality units. Let's see, Snaga skirmishers, javelins. Crossbows trying to do their thing. Crossbows actually skirmishing with Elvalin marksmen, and they are much more likely to kill whenever they get a hit, to be fair, but is it really a good use of crossbows to do this? Possibly. I mean, there are Uruk-hai crossbows and more Eastron crossbows over on this side, so using one unit for this purpose to put a little bit more pressure on the defenders might be worthwhile. More reinforcements heading down, however, 2nd Legion Axe Guard, so unlike the Hammers of Gundabad, they're not AP, but you know, with an armour upgrade, with a shield value, maybe they're a little bit more well-rounded as a unit. They're going to come in here and help support, and that will of course firmly put this fight in favour of the defenders once again. How long will this last? How long will the attackers continue to be content with how things are over here? Because over on this side of things, oof, the Witchers managed to get a volley off in there, didn't they? There they are, and they need to move here. The Guards of Khazad-Dum are being targeted. Ooh, dear, oh dear. I mean, this is the thing. When you've got Witchers on hand, you can't afford to blob up your men like that. And Ricky Beagle, they're paying the price perhaps for condensing all of his forces over here into one blob. The Guards of Khazad-Dum, which is such a strong unit, they've lost about a third of their unit, I would say, which is still significant. But the Hammers of Gundabad taking huge losses there. The Khazad-Dum Reclaimers also, and to be fair, this has prompted him to sort of commit his units now, which will make life more difficult on the front line for these infantrymen. Ooh, that is Rangers, isn't it? Yes, it is. We shall have to forego zooming in on that fight once again, I'm afraid. As long as the Athelian Rangers continue to fight, because it will break my heart if this game crashes at any point and I have to do it all again. It's always such a downer moment. Balagai pikemen fighting on the front line. More reinforcements are needed here for the attackers. They made some good ground initially, but now with additional Gondorian reinforcements and some dwarves also helping out, Reclaimers and Hammers of Gundabad, they're going to need more. Otherwise, this attack, I should say, will peter out into nothing. Seafarers of Nindamos and Romena about him back there. Seafarers are moving forward. I don't know if they've still got ammunition, have they? No, it doesn't look like they have. They've got their axes out. So yeah, they may as well be committed to melee. Trebuchet. Ooh, that was a decent hit there. into the Blackwatch Legion. Blackwatch Legion, interesting committal now. Could try and push through the lines, I suppose, but actually some forces from Dorwinion over here as well. Like, with the concentration of force heading over here now, more and more defenders very comfortably holding the attacks at bay. The attacks have to make a choice. And personally, I think the choice they need to make is just send everything in. Try and smash them down, because as it is, you're taking far too many losses for this to be worthwhile. And if this assault stops and you're forced right back outside the settlement, that's a huge failure. So we shall see if that proves to be the case. Gamp Grim now moving forward as the first line of flag-ribbon Dunlanding veterans have almost completely been destroyed. A single unit of halberdiers is probably not going to be enough to turn this fight around either. Still, the Hammers of Gundabad continue to fight away, so far, so very good, I have to say, for the defenders. We shall see if this trend keeps up in this battle. The Gamp Grim will be able to hold the line decently enough, but they will need support in order to make this worthwhile as the Phalanx starts to come into play. But yeah, they're going to need more than just a single Phalanx unit to make this worth their while. Hammers of Gundabad took a few losses there as the Halberdiers got set there. They have been in melee for quite some time though at this point, the Hammers of Gundabad, and probably racked up a very healthy kill count for themselves, so it's not too surprising to see them start to struggle a little bit now, perhaps. These strong crossbowmen starting to fire into the Nandor Glade Guard. They don't really have the best of shots, to be fair. And also, like, Nandor Glade Guard, probably you'd be better off using archers on them. They've got next to no armour. Crossbows should be much better off trying to go after a different target. In come the Flag Rib now, maybe lagging a little bit further behind the initial runic assault than I would have liked. But that is going to be more AP on the front, which will be very useful against the Elvalin in particular. Whether the quality will be there to deal with a unit like the 2nd Legion remains to be seen. Although maybe things are looking a little bit rosier for Rhun now. If they or Isengard were just to commit one more unit to make sure of things, this fight should start to go in their favour, and then maybe they can seize the initiative over on this side. Try and make some genuine progress through Moria. It's a big defence up there though. It might be better off just trying to punch right to the town centre. I mean, it's going to be tough no matter where you go. That's the nature of Moria. You're going to take some pretty hefty losses going through it, but you can definitely make it work. Balance of forces is evenly matched, so some Numenorians on the front line now. Some Angmar halberds making their way forward. There's axes and arrows being flung through the air. Poison arrows as well. Those Angmar halberds, as they try and make their way to the front line, are going to take some pretty serious losses on the way to it. Ooh. Still the Athelian Rangers are there. And the ones of Minas Ithil. But they're dumping an awful lot of their range power into this, the defenders, and they will eventually run their supply dry. But to be fair, I mean, with factions like Khazad-Dum and Gondor on the defence, you have sufficient infantry once that has happened to rely on that quality to try and see you through. In comes the cavalry, moving in with the Khazad-Dum reclaimers, who are now out of ammunition, I would assume, but pulling out those two-handed axes. Seafarers of Nindamos on the front line, trying to go up against the guards of Khazad-Dum of all things. I mean, there are also, I can see the golden armour. Is that just an officer there? Yeah, it must be, because there's only one there. They wouldn't have sent in their Royal Legion of Armenelos at the moment. Nandor Glade Guard, and you know, more Dorwinion soldiers finding their way over here as well. The defenders perhaps seeing an opportunity to fill their boots when it comes to kills. The Witchers, however, getting fully into view of all the defending archers. Are they going to try and get a volley off here? They need to make it quick before their entire unit gets destroyed. But look at that, just scythed down. That is where the Witchers are at their weakest. And honestly, even with that volley there and the hit into the militia, I don't think the Witchers paid for themselves, you know. That's the thing with the Witchers. They're either devastating or they're not worth it. And this is a situation where I'd say they're not worth it. Admittedly, that was kind of misuse from the Angmar player, getting them into that position where it's so obvious where they are in front of 2 units of Rangers, Gondor Archers and Morroquendi Bows. That's suicidal. In come the Vanguard of King Elisar, another elite unit. Gondor really not willing to let this initial choke point go without a fight. The Athelian Rangers out of ammunition now being committed to melee as well, trying to chip in. High melee defense will make them difficult to kill quickly at least. In come the Royal Legion. I don't like the way that the attackers have been filtering in individual units one at a time like this. Again, that's a hallmark of attackers that aren't really You know, it's not a good idea. It's never really a good idea. Poor planning, really. I mean, it could, you know, they might be able to wear this defensive line down. The Royal Legion are a unit of sufficient quality that might be able to turn this fight on the front line in favour of the attackers with a bit of support. In come another unit of Angmar halberds, which could provide that support, but it's been so costly over here, and you have to question how much longer Numenor are going to be able to keep up this level of pressure for. I'm not sure where the Royal Legion are actually going. I mean, they're in here now, going after the Gondor archers, and they'll be able to tear them to pieces. I think they're pursuing the Gondor militia infantry, actually. Which means that they've lost control of this unit over here. He needs to regain control of it, and he has now. Into the Gondor militia archers. They're going to try and charge them down with the Mithrandir's retinue, but that wasn't the best of charges. They're taking damage, the Royal Legion, though. Do they have... You know, they're not really taking advantage of the gap the Royal Legion made either. They need more infantry to pour in here and overwhelm. It's not really happening. I heard Siri and McKellen there. Taking some damage there from some of the attacking skirmishes. Bawabarim. In comes another unit of Blackwatch Legion. Athelian range. So yeah, now the front line of the defenders is starting to take some serious losses. Mithrandir's retinue also almost completely gone, but do Numenor and Angmar have enough left to carry this momentum to the town centre? We shall see. It may come down to the fact that maybe Rhun and Isengard need to finish the job after all the damage that Numenor and Angmar will inevitably do, but we shall see. Some more reinforcements from both sides being committed forward. Some Scion Rim for the attackers, some Nandor Glade Guard for the defenders, but more and more it's looking like Rhun have the upper hand in this fight. It's just a matter of time when the defenders will fall. The Alvelin infantry is still fighting bravely on the front. The Alvelin marksmen that are out of ammunition also committed to the front as well, but their abilities in melee are extremely limited. Second Legion Axguard still fighting bravely as well. They've been in melee for quite some time at this point, though. Only 26 of them remaining. And the Golden Boys slowly but surely making their point. Dragon's Breath moving in. Can that be used to good effect? We shall see. Still a decent amount of reinforcements, especially from Isengard, I have to say, actually, in terms of their infantry, that they can commit forwards. Not AP like the bulk of Rhune's army is, but units like the Uruk-hai pikemen in the late game, like I said, could be absolutely vital to the attackers' hopes of winning this battle. These crossbows are still here. Oh, we got here some Alvelin Vineguard moving forward. Like, I'm not sure Alvelin Vineguard are what's called for. Like, that isn't going to save this front line for the defenders, I don't think. Unless they just intend to sort of hold them at bay for a little while longer. But that doesn't really serve any purpose. It's not as if by holding them in position they're shooting them. They'll just be holding them in position for no real gain. But still, we'll see what the Vineguard are capable of in melee. I think they only have 3 attack. With the Spear Malice, that means they, against infantry, they do their damage very, very slowly, but they're also pretty difficult to kill. Having to arc those crossbow bolts a little bit, but managing to hit in several places. What have we got going on over here? Khazad-Dum Reclaimers flinging their axes in. But over here, at the very least, the attackers have now set up a good position. Adunaim Shadow Bows here, so attacking rangers as well. Romena Bawabarim are over here. Victory seems certain for them. Vanguard of King Elis are backed into a corner by their Numenorian brethren. Also the guards of Khazad-Dum, or what's left of them. Only 6 of them remaining. So normally in this situation, the guards of Khazad-Dum tend to be able to last for a lot longer, but because they're up against a faction with the quality of Numenor, Numenor are able to give maybe not quite as good as they get when it comes to the guards of Khazad-Dum, but they're certainly able to inflict more damage than your average evil faction, shall we say. Vanguard of King Elisar, but you know, both of these units will at least fight to the bitter end and take a few Numenorians with them. I do like the look of the Vanguard of King Elisar, that sort of elite Gondorian infantry unit that they have going on. The look, sort of like the gold trim on some of their plates. There's their general as well, not wearing his helmet. Balagai pikemen moving forward. Here come the Pharazim Swordmasters, Seafarers. There's Witch Realm pikemen back out there as well, so a lot of pikes still on offer for the defenders. Angmar halberds are actually routing as they chase forward maybe a little bit too much. Wands of Minas Ithil still have a bit of ammunition. They're going to try and take maximum advantage of that, I'm sure. firing more volleys in. Victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle. Khazad-Dum reclaimers against Angmar halberds. I'm not altogether surprised. Gondor archers still firing. Morroquendi bows getting back into position with their poison arrows. Some Nandor Glade Guard in support as well. So the fact that all three defending factions have had a hand in this defence means that maybe they're going to run short on manpower against Isengard and Rhun. But if I were to focus on one side, it would have been this side, because Numenor and Angmar to me are just scarier factions to have to deal with. Certainly in terms of some of the tools they have to offer, Numenor with their quality. Oof, that's Ranger Fire. Let's get out of there. Over on the other side, meanwhile, you can see the Dragon's Breath taking a bit of damage. I think fire arrows are being loosed by the BALIN marksmen to try and deal with them. Try and set fire to those artillery pieces, but the artillery is going to be wheeled right back out of the settlement now. Not willing to take that risk. Yeah, they really need to be a little bit careful with that, but here on the front line, the addition of the BALIN Vanguard does mean that this fight is going to go on for a little bit longer. But ultimately the result will be the same. The attackers will eventually win this, especially with all the AP that Rhun have to offer. Ideally suited for fighting a unit like the BALIN Vanguard. That would be a good thumbnail, I think, for this battle. All the runic boys in formation. Another unit of Flagrim has been committed at some point, which obviously the armour-piercing line infantry. Really, really good addition to this particular fight. Really gives Rhun part of their identity, really. Like, most factions don't have a unit like the Flagrim. Ooh, hello. So they're going after the BALIN marksman. I mean, that will do a lot of damage to them very, very quickly, but is it worth using the Dragon Fire in such a way? Maybe it is. Just flatten this unit of archers to make sure they can't make use of their ammunition at all. I'm very surprised, actually, that Tundra's Fox is not firing into that blob there. Like, a lot of it is Scion Rim and Flagrim, and yeah, you know, they're well armoured and they've got shields, but it's the perfect shot. And there are Gamprim in there as well, so any Gamprim you hit are much more likely to fall. It has to be said as well, there's not an awful lot of defenders left over here. There's like a blob of dwarves backed up by some Morroquendi pikes, but I think most of the support went over to here, which, if they go on to lose this fight, the defenders, I have to say that would be on Dorwinion's head, because they've committed most of their sort of reinforcements they had down there over to this side to try and stem the tide. But is that really going to be worthwhile? I mean, the Hammer Guard are on the front line now. Of course, they will absolutely crush Guardians of Khazad-Dum, but they're a little bit isolated here, and a single unit, no matter how powerful they are, unlikely to make the difference. Morroquendi bows reloading. Orcons of Khazad-Dum up on the side. I mean, you know, they're buying time for these units to get some decent kills. Nandor Glade Guard there, though, taking a full volley from the front from something, and it was the Seafarers as well. In come the Blackwatch Legion. 20 of them, though, will be pretty easily dealt with, I think, by Nandor Glade Guard, but that's a lot of Witcher-Elm Pikemen as well. Can the attackers keep this momentum going, or will the amount of damage done by the archers have the effect that the defenders clearly want it to? Poison arrows as well. Any units that are looking a little bit haggard, those poison arrows might be the final push needed to get them to rout. We shall see. Victory still seems certain. Yeah, these Hammer Guard, it's a incredibly one-sided fight between them and the Guardians of Khazad-Dum. Obviously the Guardians of Khazad-Dum pride themselves on their armour. That's exactly the sort of thing the Hammer Guard like fighting with those big warhammers of theirs. Some Belagire pikemen moving in now, maybe hoping to use their phalanx to good effect, but they've already taken a lot of damage on the approach from those archers. 33 of them are all that remains to try and do the business in melee. Still some fighting going on over here. Some Nandor Glade Guard still there. Nardukadar. Has to be said, like, Angmar and Numenor don't have a great deal left to them at this point. They won't be able to keep this assault going for much longer. They will ultimately fail, I think. The thing is, though, Rhun and Isengard need to make some inroads into the settlement more quickly than they're currently doing. Otherwise, all of these units will simply shift over to the other side, and progress will not be made. So I think the time for dithering over on this side for the attackers has stopped, and they need to move in. Eastron crossbows out of ammunition being committed to melee. Obviously they're trash in melee, but you may as well at this point. Every little helps. More damage being done. The other unit of Eastron crossbows now moving forward, as well as some snugger skirmishes. Isengard have been a little bit passive at this point. I think they need to send forward some help. Rhun have been doing the vast majority of the heavy lifting for a while now, and they need some help. Over here as well, it must be said, the defenders have pulled back a little bit, although over here there's a lot more defenders still here, so they can easily shift their focus back to the town centre should they need to. But what will be the fate? Oh, there's the Mithrandir's retinue, or what's left of it. The fate of Numenor and Angmar. Still more arrows finding their marks into the seafarers of Nindamos this time, very depleted. Still steady though, not wavering in the face of the poison arrows just yet, although I can't imagine that will last too much longer with how depleted they currently are. Nandor Gladeguard fighting bravely on the front line, and with the support of the arrows from on high, doing the damage to the Witchround pikemen, still able to hold on for a little longer. Over here meanwhile, the quality discrepancy between the Hammer Guard, who were in melee for a little while and actually took a few javelin volleys as well, now being introduced to the Pharazim Swordmass. And it does go to show that even among elite units there's a clear hierarchy, and the Pharazim Swordmass is very near the top of that, putting the Elvalin Hammer Guard in their place. The Pharazim Swordmass is taking some javelin fire and arrow fire though, so they themselves are taking a pretty decent amount of damage as it is. And there isn't much left, is there? Some Scourge Raiders back there, some Witchround Blackguards still alive, but other than that, not much to Angmar and Numenor's name. They might still be able to bludgeon their way through. These javelin men getting engaged in melee by the Witchround pikemen, so Celdwyn River Patrol probably need to retreat, to be honest with you. In come the Wardens of Minas Ithil. Do they still have ammunition, or are they out of ammunition? They've got their blades out. They are multiple HP, to be fair, so they're no slouches, and with the damage the Pharazim Swordmasters have already taken, this may be what is necessary to bring them down. Interesting. Still, this fight over here still continues. Nandor Gladeguard over here. And at this point, Rhun might even lose this fight because they're kind of surrounded. So, a bit of a dead heat over here, which favours the defenders more considering how well the fight's going for them on the other side, or how well it has gone. The attackers need to be a little bit more proactive, like I said, over on this side. I'll give Rhun some credit for sort of seizing the initiative from the defenders over here, but they haven't really done anything with it as of yet, which is a shame. Still some Elvalin marksmen ready to provide fire support as well. Orc Hunters of Khazad-Dum shifting over here. I think the defenders are sort of preparing their defence, their genuine defence against Rhun and Isengard when they move forward in numbers, because I think they, it's very obvious to see that Numenor and Angmar are on their last legs. Ones of Minas Ithil, 24 of them still remaining. Pharazim Swordmasters still showing their quality, to be honest with you. The ones of Minas Ithil were not enough to win that fight. Goes to show how powerful they really are. Celdwyn River Patrol, though, left in melee for far too long, and in the end, they did some damage to the Pharazim Swordmasters, and considering how cheap they are, that's probably enough to pay for themselves. But as defenders, you kind of need your units to go above and beyond and not just do the bare minimum. Adunaim Shadow Bows doing some damage there to the Morroquendi bows, trying to get a few more volleys off onto more vulnerable targets. The armour upgraded Witchround pikemen being subject to a bit of damage there. Witchround Blackguard now moving forwards as well. Moving in Adunaim Shadow Bows. Let's see here. Gondor archers routing. Victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle. Between the Pharazim Swordmaster and the Witchround Blackguard, that's a couple of very scary units. And to be fair, Angmar and Numenor, they have managed, they will manage to at least mount some kind of assault on the town centre, albeit with very, very depleted armies. But credit to them for that. It will mean that the defenders still have to worry about them to some extent. And obviously with Rhun and Isengard still in much better shape, This fight is far from over. Snaga skirmishes find the Isengard, showing a bit of movement. Ooh, the cannon. Back in position. What are they going to go for? Are they going to go once again for the BALIN marksmen who have opened up? They're trying to go after the artillery piece once again, trying to go after the crew, who, of course, are relatively easy to kill individually. Yeah, they're going to go after the BALIN marksmen again. Direct hit, as you would expect. Crossbows also doing their thing, so yeah, this unit of BALIN marksmen is certainly not long for this world with the amount of pressure they're currently under. But they can absorb crossbow and artillery ammunition, which is perhaps a more noble calling than anything else they could accomplish at this stage. More fire coming in from the runic artillery, I think. They're really going to try and put that unit of BALIN marksmen in the ground, aren't they? Let's see here, Eastron crossmen still firing away. Retreating back across the bridge now. They're going to fire again? They kind of need to, because they're starting to take a few losses on their artillery crew. They can't afford to just sort of stand here. The more crossbow volleys that happen, though, the fewer archers there are to actually loose those volleys. And now they're going to retreat. Probably for the best, all things considered. But the defenders still resolutely holding on. Khazad-Dum reclaimers heading back over to here. There's still the mercenary crossbowmen, which can be used. Let's see what's happening over here. So, yeah, I think from a Numenor and Angmar perspective, there's still one hammer guardsman over here, going toe to toe with the blackguard. You can hear the thud of the dragon's breath in the distance. Yeah, this guy's not going to last too much longer, having had a close encounter with the Pharazim Swordmasters, of course. Took a lot of damage there. Lasting longer than I thought he would. Still anything else down here? I don't think so. So yeah, Angmar and Numenor have committed everything forwards, but if I were them, I would definitely wait until Rhun and Isengard were mounting an assault from the other side. If you move in now, you can just be focused down, and then you won't be doing any sort of service to your teammates. But that's going to be it from Angmar and Numenor for the time being. They will bide their time, I'm sure. There's a few shots that were made over here. What's going on here? Routing Scion Rim. Interesting. I don't know what the Dragon's Breath is doing. I think they're trying to fire at these units here, but that's not going to work. There's a whole big wall in the way. Uruk-hai Reavers charging across the bridge, so a little bit more proactive now from Isengard, sending forward a unit of shock infantry to clear the rabble that's still here on the other side of the bridge of Khazad-Dum out of the way. Punching right to the town centre might be the way to go as well, because it looked as though, at least for the time being, like this defence up here would be difficult to take on, to say the very least. It's got javelin support. There's plenty of good units on hand. Oof, that was a bit of a shame. Hitting their own men. But they did at least hit some enemy soldiers as well. Albeit they may have been routing militiamen. Not ideal. Fire arrows from the Nar Rim, obviously purely cosmetic, but still it looks intimidating. And we shall see how the defenders handle this now, because Isengard and Rhun are still in reasonable shape. They've still got to worry about Angmar and Numenor to a certain extent, so if the attackers play their cards right here, they could still seize the initiative and go on to win this fight. But here, I'm not sure what they hope to accomplish with these Uruk-hai Reavers. Orc Hunters are over here, maybe they're going after the archers, but with the 2nd Legion about to move in, I mean, maybe they just hope to sort of coax the 2nd Legion into a position where their Nar Rim can hit them. But even then, armour upgraded, bit of a shield value from wearing those shields on their backs. Not the easiest target, the 2nd Legion Axe Guard, but we shall see. I mean, the Uruk-hai Reavers will do some damage in melee with that AP of theirs, but they're still hopelessly outclassed by the 2nd Legion in this particular fight. Also, well, yeah, point-blank hits from the Orc Hunters of Khazad-Dum as well means that the Reavers are most certainly not going to last very long. That leather armour is not going to do them any favours against trained Orc Hunters. So really, by sort of trying to coax the dwarves out, you know, They've really given the defenders the ability to do what they want to do, only far more effectively. In come the Gamprim, again, not exactly the best unit for dealing with arrow fire, but here they are in the vanguard nonetheless. Continuing to charge forward. There's also the Sons of the Fallen over there, which as far as a unit goes is going to be very difficult to deal with. But yeah, the Orc Hunters are going to be able to fill their boots with some good quality kills here. Lots more units crossing the bridge as well. Carmel's chosen among them. E-strong crossbows. That was quite fortunate really on the part of the 2nd Legion Axguard there, because that very narrowly missed them and that would have carved right through their unit. Forward come the Uruk-hai pikemen again, maybe a little bit... Ooh, hello, they're actually retreating here. So going right back to the town centre here. And hoping to decide the battle there. 4th Legion Shield Guards still here. I was going to say though, these Uruk-hai Reavers, maybe once again getting a little bit too far ahead of themselves. They need to consolidate their strength at this point, the attackers. Now the defenders, you know, they've chosen their path. They are going to retreat to the town centre, bottling themselves up to a certain extent, but it does mean that the attackers can sort of take stock of the situation and prepare an attack. Oof. Elvelyn taking more hits from that cannon. Gamprim though with their phalanx and now unsupported by the archers by the looks of things, the 2nd Legion are going to fall away to the Gamprim, especially with some Carmel's Chosen also arriving to support. Going to be able to get these dwarves out of the way and prepare an assault on the town centre from 3 angles. What have we got here? Seafarers of Nindamos. Oh, still. That Dragon's Breath proving to be... There's the projectile going right into the ceiling. Doing a lot of damage there to the sentries. Still proving itself to be a real nuisance, that artillery piece. But now the defenders, you know, they've fallen back to the town centre, so they've made their choice in many ways. As has Lord Blackhole by committing his Uruk-hai Reavers into a fight like this, directly into the front of Morroquendi Pikes when they're completely unsupported. That is a highly suspect move, I have to say. But, nonetheless, they will be relatively easily dealt with. Snaga skirmishes are on their way, but by the time they get here, the Uruk-hai Reavers will almost certainly be running for the hills. There's also support from the Elvelyn infantry, so I mean there's plenty of reinforcements they can call upon here. Balin's too. Still the unmistakable thud of the Dragon's Breath here. I mean the defenders will just be hoping that that thing runs out of ammunition sooner rather than later. Orc Hunters of Khazad-Dum now being engaged by Kamal's Shadow Guard, who in turn are being shot by the marksmen up on the hill. Arrows being flung into this fight from every which way. But with the Kamal's Shadow Guard, they'll easily be able to defeat Orc Hunters of Khazad-Dum in melee. But there's still the Sons of the Fallen over here, but they're kind of a bit isolated at this point. I mean, I would actually back them against the Shadow Guard alone, but pretty soon they're going to be surrounded by Scion Rim and Kamal's Chosen and all sorts of stuff. And they've only got very limited close fire support from the Elvelyn marksmen, to be honest. Dragon's Breath. Still these arrows continuing to be loosed. Sons of the Fallen now retreating. They took losses while being down there, but they do need to preserve the lives of their men if they can. I really like the fact that the Nar Rim fire sort of stays and lingers on the surface it hits for a little while. An intimidating burning effect. Over here, I think Angmar and Numenor may have jumped the gun a little bit. They've sort of managed to lure some Sons of the Fallen out from their defence, and they're jumping on them now, but they're putting themselves at the mercy of those thrown axes from the Khazad-Dum reclaimers. They can't afford to lose their blackguard in such a fashion. Which are pikemen going to move in. Pharazim Swordmaster, so the Sons of the Fallen putting themselves in an awkward situation, but perhaps it was in aid of trying to get the reclaimers to do some damage. Although I don't know why they would chase the blackguard out of range of the reclaimers, and indeed they're not. Instead they're going to move to surround this unit of Witch-Round pikemen instead. Pharazim Swordmasters now moving in. Let's see here. Only 15 of them remaining. I mean, individually they're a very powerful unit, of course, but there's our Pharazon himself as well, wielding his longsword. The Dunheim Shadowbows, again, only 16 of them remaining, but they are still rangers, so it is still the sort of thing that the defenders do need to be concerned about, at least to a certain extent, but they are really running on fumes at this point. How long they'll be able to keep this attack going, I'm not sure. But at the very least, they are now sort of, you know, Rhun and Isengard will be putting pressure on the other sides as well, so the defenders very much backed into a corner. Dragon's Breath being wheeled forwards as well, ever closer. Trolls of the White Hand, so now a much more genuine assault over here. Uruk-hai pikemen, Snaga skirmishers, and Trolls of the White Hand in over here. And Elvelyn infantry, Morroquendi pikes, I mean, these are the sort of unit the Trolls of the White Hand should be quite comfortable against. They'll be able to rack up quite a kill count. Those javelins also being thrown into the depleted Elvelyn marksmen, but getting kills with every volley. Decent kills with every volley as well. That AP, like, they may have low base damage, but the AP is going to be really useful against a unit like the Elvelyn marksman. As the battle continues, Uruk-hai pikemen, victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle. Another unit of Uruk-hai pikemen ready to be committed should the need arise as well. They're trying to do damage to the Uruk-hai pikemen with this unit of Elvelyn marksmen, but they've been easily dealt with by the Snaga skirmishers, it must be said. There goes our Pharazon. Killed by a thrown axe. That's not too surprising, to be honest with you, with the amount of losses that Numenor had already taken. It was always going to be a difficult task, but the Witcher-Helm Blackguard fighting hard on the front line here, trying to make something happen. It will need some sort of response from the defenders. They will ultimately fail, but maybe they can give Rhun and Isengard the window they need to seize victory in this battle. Who knows? It's still very hotly contested, this one. A Dunheim Shadowbow is a little further down the hill. Only 4 Pharazim Swordmasters remain, so finally being laid low after some heroics on the lower levels. Here, though, I mean, Rhun have got the ability here to flood into the town centre, and they should take it. I don't know what the Dragon's Breath are really hoping to accomplish there. The angle that they're at means they're not really going to hit anything. But if they were to pour in here, Rhun, it would surely have the desired effect on the defenders. Panic would surely set in. You'd think. Still a lot of burning going on. Khamul's Shadowbows. Let's see. Morroquendi Glademaster still alive. That'll be a worry for the attackers to have to deal with a unit of such quality. Trolls taking a few losses now, but they have managed to do enough damage that this initial defence will be overcome sooner rather than later. The other pikes have now been committed forward as well. This is going to elicit a response from Dorwinion by the looks of things, but again, I don't think a single unit of Elvelyn Vanguard is going to be sufficient. I think what they're going to do actually is just sort of stand in front and allow the Keldon River Patrol to maybe try and do some damage to the Uruk-hai pikemen in the same fashion that the Snaga skirmishers did to the Elvelyn marksmen. Albeit that could be far more decisive, because Isengard's hopes do rest somewhat on the Uruk-hai pikemen. There go, the last of the trolls, but they really helped kill off those Morroquendi pikes, which, if left to their own devices, the Morroquendi pikes would have been able to defeat the Uruk-hai pikemen. And they also took a decent chunk out of the Elvelyn infantry as well, the trolls, so ultimately I think worthwhile. That's really the best you can expect from trolls. Unless you can sort of run in behind the lines and really do damage that way, but that's not really going to happen in a situation like this, because if you run behind the lines, there's just going to be so many men to just dogpile on the trolls that it's not really worth your time. So it's a real conundrum, really. Uruk-hai pikes are going to move forward, but that is, of course, going to be all the excuse I think the Gambeson-clad Keldon River Patrol need to throw some javelins into them, and a very good use of them it would be too. So they're trash in melee though, so if it comes down to them needing to do a job in melee, it's going to be unlikely. But here we go. Isengard did push in. Better late than never. But I think Angmar are gone now. I think... No, actually the Blackguard did just retreat, so they're just waiting. So these units need to stay here, to be fair. Otherwise, what's very little is left of Numenor and Angmar will prove to be a bit of a problem. Scion Rim are in here. Uruk-hai infantry are in here, but they are somewhat surrounded. It's not the best engagement for the attackers, but at the very least they're putting serious pressure on the defenders, and with more units on the way, this is exactly what is called for, because this is their best way into the town centre at this point, and a unit of depleted Alvelin infantry is not really going to be enough to stem the tide here. Not for all that long, anyway. Morroquendi bows firing in, as well as the axe throwers, but is that going to be enough to do enough damage against units like Scion Rim and Carmel's Chosen, who will be quite resilient to that sort of damage? I mean, the Uruk-hai infantry won't last for too much longer, and as soon as they sort of reorganise their line to be a bit flatter, the defenders will be feeling a bit better about their chances. Uruk-hai pikemen getting swamped now by the Alvelin. I'm sure the javelins did at least one volley, or maybe not. Maybe not. Victory is a distinct possibility. Let's see here. Balance of forces is evenly matched. Snaga skirmishes. Trying to get into position to maybe respond in kind, but they are noticeably weaker. They've also certainly used up more of their ammunition. It looks like they've got their blades out as well, which might suggest they're out of ammunition. They're obviously awful in melee. Absolutely bottom of the barrel, but that's not a good sign either. The crossbows are shooting into them, although to be fair, no, they do still have ammunition, so it is a worthwhile use of the crossbows' time to try and stop the javelins from doing their thing. They're going to try and do some damage to the Keldon Root Patrol. A fine lack of defiance before the crossbows inevitably cause them to break. But yeah, so far, I mean, Dorwinion, they don't have a huge amount of resources left over here. I don't know whether they'll have enough to kill off all these pikes, but now the javelins are firing. Better late than never, because they're going to need those javelins and crossbow bolts to stop the pikes from slowly wearing them down. There are the Glade Masters. So yeah, you can see over here the Uruk-hai infantry being crushed from multiple sides by the defending infantry. Khazad-Dum Reclaimers out of ammunition by the looks of things, but they are still a very dangerous foe to fight in melee as well. Morroquendi pikes. Carmel's Chosen taking damage at this point as well. Eastron crossbowmen trying to do their thing. Projectiles of all descriptions being flung all over the place, trying to go after the sentries of Khazad-Dum, I think, maybe to give the Witchround Blackguard a way in. Ugh. Sorry, needed to stretch there. There's also the Adunheim Shadow Guard. Sons of the Fallen. Still two of them, still skewering some of the Blackguard. The Blackguard can't afford to just sort of hang out here. They need to kill off these Sons of the Fallen. They're not really doing a very good job of it either. Still, sentries taking some damage. There's also the Dragon's Breath getting into position. Now, if it were to fire here, it would be actually just as devastating for the attackers as the defenders, to be honest, because it's going to get a ton of friendly fire. This could be the decisive moment in the battle, though. How this artillery piece is used at this late stage. Still arrows and bolts flying all over the place. The Morroquendi bows, they probably will actually try and go after the archers here, because it's a clear shot, and also the projectiles have had an impact on the attackers' ability to try and force their way into the town centre. Khazad-Dum Reclaimers joining the front line. That AP is going to be very useful against a unit such as the Scion Rim and the Uruk-hai infantry, to be honest with you. Still reinforcements further down, though. Still some Uruk-hai archers and some crossbowmen. There's actually some infantry as far back as that as well. So, I mean, Isengard still have a decent amount of forces left to them, but having said that, their attack over here, as a result of them not having enough reinforcements over here to keep it going, it is ultimately going to fail. The Uruk-hai pikemen being forced backwards by the Alvelin, and any support that will be forthcoming as well. Let's not forget as well that they still have the Mithril Guard and the Morroquendi Glade Masters here, which as far as individual units go, like, the Guards of Orthanc are really the most elite unit that Isengard still have available to them, and it's not really the same thing. The Guards of Orthanc work better as a supporting unit, not as a powerhouse. The Berserkers, maybe, but again, like, they're really not on the same level either. Melee defense will really let them down against the Glade Masters. Meanwhile, Sentries of Khazad-Dum have had enough of being shot in the back, and they're just going to chase the Witcher on Blackguard at this point. In come the 2 Pharazim Swordmasters, destroying that 1 militiaman. Some arrows already coming their way there. This is rather interesting. Probably needs a response to this. The Dragon's Breath have like pushed their way through. They're probably out of ammunition at this point though, and now the crew are just going to try and recharge this front line. But again, in terms of quality, this defending front line will be able to hold on for a little while longer yet. Could still go either way this. I mean, in this sort of situation, experience tells you to back the attackers because they've got into a position where they still have reinforcements available to them. The defenders are really scraping the barrel at this point in terms of sheer numbers. They're going to be relying on these 2 units in particular to sort of provide the real punch they need. Yeah, this crew at this point, they're done for. If they still had ammunition, it wasn't a bad idea to try and push through and maybe shoot into the back because they weren't going to be useful any other way, but it was never really going to work with reinforcements on hand. Khamul's shadow bows trying to do their thing, but they're not really in the best of position to use their body-piercing projectiles. Still more projectiles flying through the air. Mercenary crossmen doing their thing, as are the Morroquendi bows. So now, actually, the Guards of Orthanc and Uruk-hai Berserkers are being committed forward, but it's a bit too little too late. If they attacked alongside the Uruk-hai pikemen, things could have been different. But as it is, I don't really fancy their chances now. They should be able to batter their way through these Morroquendi pikes fairly quickly. Helval Vinegard as well is really not going to enjoy fighting off against Berserkers, but all they really need to do, I think, is delay Isengard over here. Also, a unit like the Glade Masters, still in reserve over here, should be feeling comfortable. And again, I can't help but feel as though with all these elites, with the angles that the attacking skirmishers are having to work with, I would give the advantage actually to the defenders at this point. Unless the attackers can really take the bull by the horns, but again, with like the Mithril Guard heading to the front line, stuff like the Uruk-hai infantry is going to start to fall in droves. The Khamul's Chosen are already so depleted, they're not going to be able to put up much of a fight either. All of these skirmishers that still have ammunition, but not really the ideal position to use it from. There goes the Runic General. Very quickly at the hands of the Mithril Guard as soon as they arrived. Khazad-Dum Reclaimers fighting hard on the front line as well. Very good multi-purpose unit, very expensive but very worthwhile in a battle like this. Only a fool could lose this battle. Quite so. What have we here? Kelvin River Patrol. Victory seems certain for the pikes, to be fair. Like, they are actually. With the support of the javelins, they're buying enough time for the Berserkers to be held at arm's length and killed by the javelins. And once again, it's an example here of Isengard just sending forward not enough to break through the defences and ultimately getting worn down, playing into the defenders' hands, really. The Guards of Orthanc are back here. Like, Guards of Orthanc in Shield Wall could have pushed through them very quickly, made a hole for the Berserkers to flood into, and then they could have ripped the Keldon River Patrol limb from limb. But as it is, they've played right into the defenders' hands, really. And Isengard's final ace in the hole, I think, here. Well, not their final ace in the hole, but definitely one of their last rolls of the dice is not really coming off here. They should be able to kill off the Morroquendi pikes, but it's not going to take too much more to bring them down, I don't think. The last ace in the hole for Isengard will be their crossbowman, I'm sure. Adunheim Shadow Bows doing their thing. Having a skirmish fight, a mini skirmish fight here with the Orc Hunters of Khazad-Dum. Adunheim Shadow Bows as well. For Rangers, have got superb armour. So if you're gonna skirmish, sort of skirmish with other archers with a ranger unit, make it the Adunheim Shadow Bows. They'll do a decent job of it. Again, rolling forwards here. Dwarven pikemen helping to hold the front line. The Mithril Guard being brought off the front now. It's starting to get a little bit more desperate for the attackers now, because all of the genuine infantry on this front line has been dealt with. Now it's down to stuff like Nar Rim and Carmel's Shadow Bows and Eastrong Crossbowmen to keep the attack alive, and they won't be able to do that for much longer with, you know, Khazad-Dum Reclaimers and Legion units from Khazad-Dum bearing down on them. think this all points to a defensive victory. It's going to be close. I mean, the defenders with their crossbows can certainly still make a difference, but yeah. Over here, meanwhile, the Berserkers now being backed up by the Guards of Orthanc. Better late than never, I suppose. But now the Glade Masters are on their way over here. And of course, against the Guards of Orthanc, they should be able to fight that fight very easily, especially with a Celdwyn River Patrol meat shield to help them out. Tundrous Fox, obviously a player that most certainly knows what he's doing by now. Well, they're going to back up. Maybe they'll be recommitted to just sort of follow them in. Mercenary Crossmen just sort of diving back and forth between the two fights. There's another unit of Uruk-hai infantry actually, so there is another genuine infantry unit on the front line. Uruk-hai infantry, as decent as they are though, they're going up against some of the stronger units that Khazad-Dum has to offer, so I don't really fancy their chances all that much if I'm being brutally honest. I really like the masks on the Khazad-Dum units as well, like the Khazad-Dum Reclaimers and the Guards of Khazad-Dum. Very cool. Mithril Guard as well. The Mithril Guard, my favourite part of their unit model honestly is their axes. I like the Dwarven runes on them. Meanwhile, 4 Witchround Blackguard over here, including the Angmar General, going after this depleted unit of BALIN infantry, getting shot in the back as well by the... Actually no, it's the Adunheim Shadowbows that are trying to give them support, more so than shoot them in the back. Obviously this isn't going to last too much longer for the Angmar General with the Mithril Guard closing in. Completely different proposition to having to fight BALIN infantry, and that unit of infantry is probably going to go off to chase the Adunheim Shadowbows off. Indeed they are. So yeah, more and more the defenders stamping a seal of authority on this battle. The Angmar General isn't going to last much longer. Oversized mace or no. Bit of a bully circle forming here. Getting shanked and stabbed and slashed by man and dwarf alike. Bloody hell, one of them says. He's not dying easily, is he? Got to give credit to the generals units, especially when you put them in a multiple HP unit already. They become quite tanky as an individual entity. Victory almost certain for the Uruk-hai infantry at this point, so not enough on this front line to sort of really trouble the Uruk-hai infantry actually. But as soon as the Mithril Guard arrive, that will turn right back around again. Come on, General. I'm zooming in on you for a reason. Surely you have to die at some point. Actually being very aggressively pursued by this one BALIN infantryman. He needs to be careful, otherwise he could die for that. In comes a charge from the BALIN infantry once again. Not the best charge though, so not enough to... Well, actually, eventually I think it was the BALIN infantry that killed him. Fair play. Fair play to him. Mark 20 bows back here. Celdwyn River Patrol. And over here you can see the fight. The Guards of Orthanc obviously outclassed in this fight with the Glade Masters. They may get the odd kill here and there, but obviously it's not a fight that these elite Dunlanders really wanted. There's one Berserker left, sort of chanting to the sky. Perhaps he's asking why on earth he was committed in without support to fight off against Pikeman. Mithril Guard. Perhaps going to move back to help out over here. Eastron Crossbowmen. They don't have the angle to shoot, so I think that's why they're just being committed in as makeshift infantry at this point to try and make something happen, but their fate is already sealed, especially when the Mithril Guard arrive on the front line. BALIN infantry also over there. Still the crossbowmen, and to be fair, I haven't seen them utilise much of their ammunition at all, and this really is the last best hope for the attackers to take something from this game, but it would involve trying to kite them around, and I don't really think it's going to happen. I think there's enough left over here. I mean, fine guard. Also, they can't kite around because they've still got mercenary crossbowmen, which will be able to catch them, so it's all a moot point anyway, really, isn't it, at the end of the day? Still, the Glade Masters, such a strong unit, obviously. Now the announcer sees the light. An equivalent unit to something like the Elven King's Palace Guard from Mirkwood, so it gives you an idea of just how powerful this unit is. The pride and joy of the Dorwinion infantry force. Give the Guards of Orthanc credit though. Like, they are withstanding this pummeling they're taking for a long time, which is their entire purpose, of course, but it's still impressive to see in action. Mithril Guard now being committed to the front line, of course. This should be the final nail in the coffin, really, although perhaps they don't want to charge too far forward, because that might put them in view of the Uruk-hai crossbowmen. But even with that, I don't think that that will be enough, really. Uruk-hai archers being committed to the front line now, just throwing everything in. Everyone will die with a sword in their hands. BALIN infantry. Very depleted at this point, but certainly proving to be a very effective backbone of the Dorwinion army. Mithril Guard retreating, perhaps hoping to draw the attackers in a little further. 23 BALIN Vine Guard moving forwards as well. They're going to try and charge in once again. There's like the Uruk-hai infantry themselves are on their last legs, and that's really the last infantry unit they have left over here. The rest is all just archers and crossbows. Meanwhile, Guards of Orthanc still putting up a decent fight of it, 17, but you can see they are getting some kills, but it's at a very slow pace. That one Berserker is finally going to rejoin the fray as well. Well, there goes the Isengard general. So that, as we enter the final phases of this fight, very close indeed though, 3% for a fight like this, in favour of the defenders as well, is quite rare. Moria does tend to provide close games though, which is interesting because you would expect it to be sort of fairly hefty wins and defeats one way or the other. But it always seems to throw up the close ones, which I'm certainly appreciative of. As the Mithril Guard continue to advance down the hill, carving their way through the lowly Uruk-hai before them, supported by their dwarven brethren and their human allies. Well, well, well. There's still these Uruk-hai crossbowmen, but like at this point it's kind of a futile gesture to have them do anything. You can try and maybe close the gap a little bit on your foes by just sticking them into fire at will and have them fire at anything, but ultimately they will be caught. At the Glade Mass at this point, their work is done. I think the cavalry is going around the back, isn't it? Indeed it is. There will be no escape for the Uruk-hai crossbows. They're going to turn around and try and get a last samurai action into the mercenary crossbowmen, I would assume, but they're going to actually fire. So it's going to be Napoleonic style warfare here, where people stood in neat lines to shoot one another. The Uruk-hai crossbow is getting the first shot though, which is always going to be decisive, especially considering the difference between the unit sizes of infantry and cavalry. So the mercenary crossmen, they've done a good job so far this battle, and their reward apparently is to stand in front of these Uruk-hai and die. But still, Mithril Guard slowly pushing forwards. We're into the final 1,000 frames now, so Isengard's morale is not going to hold itself together for too much longer, you would have thought. Mithril Guard charging downhill. Well, I mean, I'm surprised that they haven't routed already, to be honest with you, especially the Uruk-hai archers. They are shaken, to be fair, but when you're faced with Mithril Guard and you're a unit as lowly as this, you'd expect the routing to come sooner, but I guess Isengard a little bit more disciplined, a little bit more professional than the other orcs on offer in the game. There's still a few of those Merc crossbowmen left alive. Keldon River Patrol also moving in, although I don't think they'll actually arrive on the front line quick enough before the Uruk-hai crossmen actually rout, although maybe actually this might be the final decisive blow. Now all of the mercenary, well actually no, not all of them, but most of them are dead. The Keldon River Patrol, can they strike the final decisive blow? Yes they can. Their charge was what finally ended the battle. Very close fight it was indeed as well. And well played to the defenders. I think the way that they handled themselves over here, especially dealing with the Angmar Numenor assault, was very, very well done. Isengard, I think, based on the amount of kills you got, you can see that he was a little bit too conservative. I think Isengard and Rhun in general, they had an opportunity at one point to really seize the initiative over on their side, and they didn't really take it, which is a bit of a shame, because I think that could have led to them winning the battle. You can certainly tell from the fact that all three of the defending armies were sending help over, like Dorwinion and Khazad-Dum were sending help over to help Gondor deal with this side, and that's always a sign that they're undermanning to a certain extent over on the other side of the fortress. And when you see that happening, as Isengard and Rhun, you need to take the initiative and try and do something. But in the end, they kind of, you can tell they wanted to take the slow and steady approach, but with how Numenor and Angmar were approaching the battle, it didn't really mesh too well, and there was a bit of a disconnect there. And ultimately, the defenders, they worked well enough with one another to take full advantage of that. So, very, very well done to them. Big thanks to MSQ2 for sending me the battle replay. The dwarves actually getting the most kills, which shows their strength in melee more than anything else. Because obviously Gondor, with 2 units of rangers, you'd expect them in this situation, and the trebuchet actually, to really rack up the kill count. But in this case, it was the dwarves instead. So let's see what did the damage for Gondor nonetheless. So Gondor archers doing very well. Athelian rangers and ones of Minas Ithil, of course, especially the regular rangers with their higher unit count, always going to do well in this sort of situation, breaking 300 kills. Fountain Guard doing okay for themselves, Guards of Osgiliath. It is worth saying as well, though, that the Gondorian defence, when Numenor and Angmar really threw an attack forwards, it did actually crumble. So that's probably why the Gondorian infantry overall probably didn't do as well, anywhere near as well as the Khazad-Dum, which you can see over here. Obviously, lots of militia infantry, to be fair, which is a very interesting choice, to say the least. None of them obviously did all that well in terms of kills, but they did stand in the way. They did absorb fire as well from axe throwers and witches alike, so they did their job in many ways. Trebuchet did okay for itself. Mithrandir's retinue was really just a nuisance, but it managed to pick up some decent kills as well, including on the Royal Legion of Armenelos. So I think, considering his army, I think MSQ2 did his job very well, blunting the Numenor Angmar attack, and then obviously Dorwinion, and especially Khazad-Dum with their numbers, did very, very well for themselves indeed. So yeah, a nice battle. Obviously nice to see Moria again. Nice classic map that's been here ever since Third Age Reforged Vanilla was played commonly. So as for the next battle, like I said, we're sort of getting back to the time where it's going to be even more hectic. Like, it's been sort of interesting with assignments. Like, I haven't really done anywhere near as much as I wanted to over the past couple of weeks because, again, like, things haven't been ideal for me to do what I wanted to do. And that's likely to get even worse as term goes on. I will endeavour to keep my current schedule, but it may slip to one video every 3 days rather than one video every 2 days for a couple of little time stints. But we shall see. I think nothing is definite just yet. But like I said, things are a little bit fluid at the moment. I want to try a couple of new things, but I'm endeavouring to make that so that it's not at the expense of my current schedule. So you don't need to worry about that. But like I said, also, just with the university schedule being what it is, it's going to be kind of difficult in those terms as well. So regardless, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.